When you receive the M81, you'll receive the wheels and the axle independently from the frame of the machine. There's a cotter pin on one side of the axle, slide it through a wheel, slide it through the axle housing, and then insert the wheel over the end of the axle on the other side and lock in place with the cotter pin that would come with the machine. Same token, on the front, normally the handle is shipped independently. There are 4 bolts to install the front handle of the machine, and I'm sure that in your case that's probably already done on all the equipment. I'd like to talk a little bit about the electrical features of the machine. On the model M81, the electrical components are confined primarily to the control box here. Your extension cord will plug in here. Your reversing switch to reverse the rotation of the reel is here. You can see the forward position and a reversing position. The air switch or diaphragm switch is here, where your foot pedal again will plug into the stem to make the foot pedal operable, and is the ground fault receptacle. The ground fault receptacle is again for your protection. It protects you from shock in the event of being in too much water. And in addition, you can plug in components such as drills, such as lights, whatever you need without having to run more than one extension cord. There's a test button on the ground fault receptacle, and you might want to periodically check that, make sure that the current is running through the way it's supposed to. This is a sealed box. The box clips down in place. There's a gasket around that so that moisture can't get into the electrical control box. The path of the electricity, which is something that I've always thought is helpful for all the operators to know, is that your electricity is going into the control box, through the ground fault receptacle, up to the safety switch, which needs to be in the on position for the machine to work. If this machine is turned, or excuse me, if this switch is turned off, then the foot switch becomes inoperable again. From this switch then, the electricity travels back down to the motor and turns the motor on and off. I'd like to cover several maintenance features that are specific to the M81 machine. We'll talk about the gearbox a little bit. The gearbox is fairly bulletproof and for the most part fairly maintenance free. You will periodically want to pull the oil level bolt out of the side, which is this bolt here, and even if you take the machine and tip it toward you slightly and the oil runs out, you have plenty of oil. Normally if you have to top it, it will be a very small amount, several ounces at the most. The most oil that we actually put in it at assembly is approximately 6 to 8 ounces. If you do need to put a little bit of oil in, the bolt at the top of the gearbox comes out. You can use a small funnel and run the oil in, and we do stock the oil. It's a multi-weight 90 to 140. On the motor, I'll turn the machine. It's hard to see. You might be able to pick up a little yellow cap. There's a little oil cap on either side of the electric motor, which oils the shaft. You can periodically lift those out, either with a fingernail or with a small screwdriver. Several drops of oil is all you need to put there, and if you want to do that once a month or every several weeks, that's going to be more than plenty, depending on how much you run the machine. Underneath the belt guard, of course, is the belt. Several notes about the belt tension. You don't have to keep the belt super tight. We found that if the belt is tightened too much, the tension between the motor and the gearbox, it restricts the coasting of the reel when you turn off the machine. And you want at least several rounds of coast when you turn that off. So when we set the belt tension here at the factory, if you reach in and squeeze the belt, it should be there should be about an inch of space between the two sides when you squeeze the belt at the center. If you do have to tighten the belt a little bit, rather than mess with trying to let the motor drop down and loosening the bolts on the motor, you can actually swivel the entire gearbox upward a little bit. by loosening a bolt here and here. There are two bolts that go through the back of the frame into the back of the gearbox. If you loosen those several rounds, you can actually swivel this box upward, which will tighten the belt slightly. And that's normally all you'll have to do for probably a number of years. And that belt should last almost forever. Other than that, make sure, of course, there's adequate air in the tires. And another thing that doesn't hurt at all is to periodically keep a little bit of grease up at the front and the nose piece of the machine, which both helps the rotation of the feed arm, which you'll see later, and also helps the cable slide through the front of the machine. You've probably already, at your facility, installed and read through the instruction manual on the automatic feed. But we'll go through this step by step. This bracket, when you receive the auto feed, is normally loose. The two bolts that on the bottom side of the automatic feed are kept loose so that you can slide this bracket up and down as is necessary. The top two bolts running through the top cylinder here are also the mounting bolts. You can see two holes, threaded holes in the front casting of the machine. The top two bolts here, you picked that up, Michael, on camera?
Yes.
These top two bolts will install the automatic feed in place. Tip it outward a little bit. Make sure that this bracket catches the bottom flange of this casting. Lift up and into place. Once you have these tightened down, make sure that the bracket is pushed up on the bottom side and tighten the two lower bolts. Okay, cut. Before we go ahead with assembly, is there are 6 grease fittings on the automatic feed, and it's very helpful to keep that well greased. In addition, once in a while, put a few drops of oil and some grease on the faceplate, because the faceplate rides on the outer ring of the automatic feed, and that ensures that you'll always have free motion on that. In addition, we have a caution tag here. Caution, do not over tighten. The biggest mistake that a lot of people make with the automatic feed is they think they have to really tighten this down when they're working it hard. We ask in the instructions that you don't tighten it down more than is necessary to move the cable. It's better to help the cable along by hand than it is to over tighten that, because it puts a little bit too much pressure on the feed rollers, and then you can start breaking feed rollers. You will, in time, break feed rollers. It's an ongoing maintenance item that is just inherent with running the automatic feeds. Okay, Michael, who's running the camera, actually helped me lift this up. Helped me lift the reel onto the main shaft of the machine. Like the M661, the back of the reel hub simply slides right onto the shaft. And on the bigger machine, I like to hook up the drive spring to the drive rod. It stabilizes a little bit for installing the revolving arm. I'll move it over a little bit. A word about the revolving arm. We call it the J-lock arm, and for obvious reasons, the telescoping shaft, which will connect the feed arm from this point to the small hole in the hub, needs to be kept out of the way when installing. So we simply have made a J-lock here on the spring-loaded shaft. Not show you how hard I have to work being a weakling. Push the shaft down, lock it out of the way. Now this is the part that people seem to struggle with the most in the learning process. That the easiest way to install the feed arm, or install the cable through the feed arm, is, again, use that twisting motion. If you keep twisting that through, there's very little force needed to push that on through. And there it is. I like to keep just a little bit of cable coming through. Insert that into the front of the machine. Then release the J-lock into place, into the front hub. Okay. I find it much easier to detach the spring from the drive rod, to push the cable through the automatic feed, and to be able to find the center. I find that it's easiest to simply push the cable forward, rotate the reel by hand, and as you rotate the reel, push the feed arm toward you, and that'll force the cable forward. Slight pressure forward, and then you'll find that it'll find the center and come straight through. So use the freedom that you can achieve for the rotation of the reel by, again, unclipping that drive spring. It's a real advantage for you. Okay, we have that through. Now we can hook up the drive spring to the drive rod. We can plug in the machine. I've already plugged in the foot switch. Make sure this is an off. And we're ready to operate the machine. Okay, as before, I have my goggles, I have gloves, and again, if you have an entire face shield, you may want to wear that as well. Also, another thing I want to mention is clothing. One of the biggest mistakes that young sewer cleaners make is they'll either wear something loose around the neck, they'll wear a shirt that's not tucked into the pants, which we think is very dangerous. We like to see clothes that are fairly tight to the body. This is probably even a little bit looser than I should be wearing for the cleaning process. And the reason for that is, as a cable comes out, and as that cable turns, it opens up a little bit. As it's rotating, that turn can close around clothing, and then it can catch you, and it's not good for you, and it's not good for anyone involved. Quite obviously. Your M81 has the SJ fitting, which is, I call it a unisex fitting because it's neither male nor female. And it's simply designed to slide together. And periodically, what you'll want to do with the SJ fittings is pull the little cap screws out, put a little bit of grease or oil on them. That'll keep it from rusting, and it'll keep it from sealing in there when you don't want it to do that. That's really the only maintenance thing that you'll need to do, and you'll find that these little cap screws will last much longer. Do the same with each blade fitting. In this case, you can either slide a blade directly on, tighten the cap screw on either side, and again, they don't have to be super tight, or you can also use a smaller Allen wrench to do that. We'll pull out the cable, and because we're in my office right now, I don't actually have a cleaning pipe. As before, get your machine within 3 to 4 feet of the pipe opening. Insert the cable and the blade at least 3 to 4 feet into the pipe if you can before turning on the machine. We roll at MyTana a very tight cable. It's we call it a tight wound, left hand wound standard cable. And with that, and with the configuration of our arm, you'll find that the cable will tend to want to work its way forward, so that as I turn on the machine, without using the automatic feed, I'm doing very little work to make the machine come out. But it does, however, resist coming back in. So what we recommend is you go out by hand and use the automatic feed for coming back in. So you can put it in reverse, slowly tighten down on the automatic feed, and as you can see, the cable will come right back. Then if you're needing to go back out, loosen it a few turns, feel free to go forward. Some operators over time will get very comfortable with using both the forward and the reverse, or even locking it in neutral and simply moving the cable back and forth a little bit. For starting out, for learning, for getting the feel of the cable, we highly recommend that you don't use the automatic feed for going forward. We've found over the years that people ruin a lot less cable that way, and then start using it again as you get comfortable with it. For getting, we offer several other things with the blade packet. One of the things that you probably received or should have received with each machine was a very flexible 3/4 inch leader. And as called upon or as necessary, use this, simply attach it to the front of the cable and then attach the blade, as so. Attach your blade up to the front of the leader, which will both help you get started around bends and will help you, especially in 3 and 4 inch lines. 6 inch lines you probably, or 6 or 8, you won't need to use this particular feature nearly as much. The other thing I would like to mention is many times time is money. And for that reason, some people will think that they want to go into a 4 inch line immediately with a 4 inch blade. We think it's not the best idea. A better idea is to go in with the smallest blade, small single, or we offer a small double, which will be in your blade kit as well. Go in with your smaller blade first, and the reason for that is it's much less likely that you'll damage the cable. There's always a chance that there's a break or an offset inside a line. And what this will do with using a smaller tool is to make sure or reduce the chances of you either damaging your cable again, damaging a line, or creating all kinds of problems. Then, once you've made a pass with the smaller blade, then you can go through with subsequently larger blades as is necessary. Okay, we finished the job. We're pulling the cable back out, letting the automatic feed do the work. A note, I'm pulling it out also. Even if you pull out a cable by hand and you're not using the automatic feed, leave the machine on again. And the reason for that is, as we mentioned with the smaller machine, you want all the loops of the cable to stack to the outermost part of the drum. And the reason for that is, again, if there are loose loops that form inside the drum, that's where, when you start to torque up on a cleaning job, that's where the cable can tend to want to loop over or cause problems inside the drum. So, if you're finding loose loops, keep the machine running, loosen this up, pull it out past that loop. Sometimes just jamming it back in is enough to make sure that that's stacked adequately back into the drum. Okay, we finished. I'll tighten that down. What we ask is that operators never transport the machine with a blade on. It's highly dangerous, and it just creates a danger that, again, nobody wants to deal with. So always remove the cutting utensil from the end of the cable, even if you don't necessarily remove the reel for transport, as you in some cases will, and in some cases you won't. Okay. One thing I wanted to mention, so that you could see the inside of the cable, or the inside of the cage, I did not put on the reel cover. Normally in the assembly process, we slide on the reel, then we put on the reel cover before we put it on the feed arm. In this case, we wanted you to be able to see the inside of the drum and see how, again, the cable is stacking up inside the drum. So I didn't put that in. Okay, you finished the job. We're going to disassemble. We want to break this down because we're going to go into a steep basement. So we want to be able to transport the reel and the machine separately. I push that back. I'll detach the spring in the back, and again, rotating that just a few turns allows that cable to slide out of the automatic feed quite easily. Pull back the spring. Okay, I am pulling back on the T-handle to lock the telescoping shaft out of the way. Again, I've pushed the cable back in so that it's inside the arm here and not in the way. Then I simply pull that out this way with a twisting motion. Pull off the arm, insert the cable back inside the cage, and now the cage can slide right off the main shaft of the machine for separate transport from the frame of the machine. Several other things that I'd like to mention. For some of your taller operators, we have added the feature of a telescoping handle. We have 3 different positions. We have this position, which extends at about, I believe is it 12 inches, Michael? And then we have a full extension of 18 inches. What that allows you to do then is to, a taller operator doesn't have to bend down so far, or if he's tipping the machine up for transport, he can be fully extended without having to bend over. And again, that's a feature that's available upon request. All right, with that, we'll move on to the M15. Feature that I would like to point out on the M81 is with the design of the back handle, you can also tip up the machine. There'll be an occasional call for doing some lines overhead. And a nice feature of this is to be able to simply lift it up like this and be able to work it from its hind end. It also gives you an additional storage feature so that if you need to store it vertically as opposed to horizontally, you can certainly do that.